And, out of the woodwork, people who I knew who I had no idea were INFJs started messaging me and saying that they had never felt so sort of pinpointed, that they had never heard from someone who seemed so dialed in to the way that their minds work, the things that they feel, what they ultimately need in life.
Three, two, one. Welcome to the Campfire Circle. I'm your host, Tanya Bhattacharya, and I empower purpose-driven women in building influential personal brands that drive change and raise revenue. We all talk about getting a seat at the table, but why though? Who wants to sit in a stuffy boardroom anyway? Let's reimagine the ultimate space of leadership as a campfire circle, where we share stories that inspire movements, build brave communities to huddle together with for warmth, and where there is always room. Come sit with us.
Joy, I am so thrilled, excited, just happy to chat with you one-on-one today because, as I've shared with you, I have been such a long-term fan and consumer of your content. I almost feel like we need a new word for that type of relationship, like someone who just loves and gets so much out of everything you put out into the world. But anyway, I just really love and appreciate that you are a psychotherapist, a life coach, an educator specifically for INFJs. Because I am an INFJ, and everything that you share just feels like it was like written for me specifically, and your words always meet me where I'm at. So I just thank you for being here on the Campfire Circle podcast.
Oh, I am so honored to be here, Tanya, and everything you just said is just lifting my heart. I'm so excited to be chatting with another INFJ today.
I know we're a rare bunch, so this is pretty cool.
We are.
Yeah. So Joy, first things first, I would love for you to tell me the story of what you have grown through to become the guide you are today. So yeah, tell me your story.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I grew up like a lot of INFJs, really seen and valued for what I could give socially. So what I could give to others, the empathy, the desire to deeply understand other people, the listening, the intuiting how other people feel and what they need and really wanting to deliver that. But as with all INFJs, I also had this deeply interior life, and I didn't feel understood regarding what I needed internally. I needed the things that all INFJs need, which is to have lots of space and time to process my experiences. We do our best sort of processing magic after an experience happens or after we learn something. We're sort of connecting it to our network of everything else we know and have experienced. And we're tracing patterns, and, we're really seeking to deeply understand what we've been through so that we can better anticipate what's coming and be ready for it. I wanted to be valued for the way that my intuition guides me, but that wasn't really well understood by people around me. I wanted to be understood for and valued for my imagination and the way that I vacillate between needing connection and needing solitude. But those parts of me were not only misunderstood, they were reacted to with, I would say, judgment. And so these very core pieces of who I am and what I need in order to thrive were really unmet. And so I remember just feeling a really profound aloneness, even surrounded by people, a sense of not being really seen and understood growing up. In fact, I remember writing in my journal when I was about 14 that I would rather be understood than loved. And I knew that I was loved, but that vital piece of feeling seen and valued for who I actually am was missing. And of course, now years later, I realize being understood is how I feel loved. One of the ways, a core way that I feel loved. In addition to being an INFJ, I'm mixed race, I'm Egyptian and white. I grew up in a very homogeneously white, very, very small town, so I always felt a bit on the outside in that regard. I would say being INFJ, being such a rare type in the population, you add to that any other marginalized identity, and then you've doubled or tripled or quadrupled, the ways in which you don't feel understood, the ways in which you are not reflected back to you in the society that you're living in. But when I was, again, about 14 years old, my mom came into my room one day and she was holding a book. And she said, Joy, I think you should read this. I think this is you. And it was a book about the Myers-Briggs. And it was a very, kind of like, I think the section on my type was about a page and a half. It was a very cursory overview. It didn't go into any of the kind of deep, yummy mechanics of the ways that we function. But I remember reading those couple pages and feeling understood for the first time in my life. And for probably the next 10 years, I would come back to that book and those pages over and over again. It was just my one place where I felt really like I was being mirrored back to me. So fast forward many, many years later, I became a licensed therapist. And I discovered that the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, is actually based on the personality theory of Carl Jung. And that he went so much more deeply into the ins and outs of the actual sort of building blocks of each personality type. And it was so much richer and deeper than what you typically get through the MBTI or just the Myers-Briggs. And I felt like I had struck gold. I received all that language that I didn't have and all those conceptual handles that I didn't have for really deeply understanding, not just describing like most Myers-Briggs resources do, but really deeply understanding how I tick, what I need, how the different components of my personality work together and function together. That was huge. I wanted to shout that from the rooftops the minute I, started really grokking that information.
I love your mom. I love your mom. I'm so happy. This is this is so resonant, Joy. I just have to say this is so resonant, that need to be understood. I wonder if that's why I went down the pathway I did and became a marketing personal brand person. Anyway, thank you for sharing your story with us. There's so many things, as you can see, that I want to touch on all at the same time, but let me just say this. I love how you have identified what you once struggled with, right? Wanting to be understood, knowing that you are different from others, being so empathetic and in tune with the needs of others, and turned them into deep strengths in terms of what you do now. Your story is such a cool example of this, but I definitely believe that we, and when I say we, I'm talking about service providers, change agents, coaches, helpers, I believe that we are the most well-equipped to serve the person that we once were, because like you have shared in your story, we find solutions through our lived experience, through trudging through, and then we learn, find solution, and get to share them as reputable and trusted guides for other people, right? Who are now struggling through the things that we once were. But I can also imagine, though, that choosing to niche down to work just with INFJs, which are the rarest type at 1 to 3% of the population, I can imagine as a fellow sort of business owner that could maybe make you a little bit nervous, right? To need to be so specific. So did you ever worry that you were pigeonholing yourself or maybe missing out on a whole group of potential clients?
That's a fantastic question. And I remember when I first started telling people, this is what I'm going to do, they kind of balked. They were like, oh my goodness, are you sure? You're going to focus your entire business on the smallest population in terms of type? You're going to have 3 customers and then that's going to be the entire population of INFJs. And honestly, what's interesting is it was the exact opposite. I knew from my experience as an INFJ that there was just an absence of deeper learning and understanding and validation for INFJs. And I thought to myself, okay, so yeah, we're such a small slice of the population, but when you think about how many people there are in the world, 1 to 3%, that's still a lot of people, right? And my mission was not just to serve people, where I live. My mission was really to reach people all over the world, which, I still hope to do. And I thought there's some gold here, because not only are there a lot of INFJs out there when you think about, the entire world's population, but I hadn't found anything like this for INFJs. I think that there are plenty of places you can go to get really quality learning about type, but it's not niched down to focus just on INFJs. And to be honest, some of the best learning I found out there about type is by people who are not INFJs. So they have this really academic understanding, or maybe they work with INFJs, so they have the experience, the experiential learning, but they're not INFJs themselves. They don't get to sit down every day and pattern recognize what's going on inside themselves and how they're working and how they're wired. And so I felt like even for all the information out there about INFJs, to be able to come to a space where the guide is an INFJ, and the focus is not just on describing our type, not just on, commiserating about our type, but about really digging down and diving deep into our type's brilliance, how to use our strengths to address our struggles, how to get out of common binds that INFJs find themselves into, how to, craft the kind of life we dream of that's full of connection, but also space for ourselves. I felt like that wasn't being done, or at least I hadn't found anyone doing that. And that made me feel good about venturing out in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm hearing two kind of things come up, and first I want to say that when I decided to niche down kind of into the LinkedIn platform versus just like all of the ways you can express your thought leadership, I felt some of the same kind of ways, the same kind of tingles, like, oh my gosh, well, I only have 3 clients, right? And I know now when I look back at that is so rooted in kind of scarcity mentality, which is not like that's just, scarcity is so enmeshed sometimes in our society. And I think sometimes that by niching down, we get to really practice living in an abundance mindset. And especially like you said, with the internet, with the global nature of our work, there's really still, even though we work with you work with a small subset of the population, it's almost like an infinite and abundant group of people that you can reach, right? So by getting clear and specific on who you help like you did, you'll definitely attract the right people to you. And the second thing that I really heard in what you said was that piece around people being attracted to experts. And when I say experts, I'm not talking about degrees or that academic understanding, like you had also mentioned. It's really that lived experience. I think your story is a testament to how our lived experience is the greatest predicator to whether we can help somebody or not, right? So I just really love that. And how did you notice your business start to shift and change and grow as you made a stake in the ground and said, yes, I am for INFJs. This is who I help. Yeah, tell me about that.
Okay. Well, I think I need to start with just a quick story about the day I made that switch. So I remember sitting down, I was writing an email to my list, and this list, includes my colleagues, my entire circle. I didn't know how many INFJs were out there, but I knew that I wanted to start speaking to the INFJs in my list. And so I wrote an email announcing my first offering for INFJs, which it's no longer happening. It's something that I, was really beautiful for a time. And then I stopped to move on to other things, but it was called INFJ School, and it was a community space, and it was a chance to learn more about the components of our personality as INFJs. And I wrote that email in a different voice than I had written any other message for my audience. Prior to that, I had specialized in working with highly sensitive people. And for any listeners who don't know what that is, you can check out the work of Elaine Aron. She's a pioneer in that field. But any type can be highly sensitive. So I was speaking in a more general voice up to this point. And I remember sitting down and writing this email, and I was just really holding front and center really clearly, the INFJ types who I wanted to reach. And I was writing from my INFJ heart straight to the hearts of other INFJs. And I felt really good about the email. I was like, this is me speaking in my most authentic voice. And I think it's really going to resonate in a much more deeper way than anything I've ever written before for INFJs. But right before I hit send, it suddenly hit me that, like I said, this list includes, everybody in my circle. It includes, my professional colleagues, people I don't know all that well, people I've never sort of bared my soul to. And I reread the email, sort of putting myself into the perspective of someone who's like not an INFJ. How is this going to read to people who are not that type? And all of a sudden, I felt this stab of fear. I felt so exposed. I felt like to a non-INFJ, this was just going to read as really strange and oddball and, like overly emotional and all this stuff. And I sat there, I just sort of paused, like, can I do this? And then it hit me, if I'm going to find the INFJs out there in my audience, because my mission is to reach INFJs because we have such a potential for being able to heal and change, the way the world currently functions. And the idea of empowering people with so much healing and change potential, I can't change the systems we live in single-handedly. But if I can give INFJs the self-knowledge and the validation and the self-understanding to fully embrace themselves, stand rooted in their gifts and their power, then that can start changing the world, right? Not start, people are already out there changing the world, but that can make a dent, right? So I sat there, just really sitting with my mission. And I thought, you know what? I'm not writing to everyone. I'm not writing to everybody in my circle. I'm not writing to every colleague. I know who I'm writing for, and I hit send. And, out of the woodwork, people who I knew who I had no idea were INFJs started messaging me and saying that they had never felt so sort of pinpointed, that they had never heard from someone who seemed so dialed in to the way that their minds work, the things that they feel, what they ultimately need in life. So the first big change that I saw in my business was just hearing more and more from individual people how much my work was reaching them and how uncanny it felt that the things that I wrote, in general about INFJs landed on such a personal level for them. And that was huge for me. I mean, what better, feedback or validation to hear that I'm on the right track when the very people I'm trying to reach are telling me how helped and seen they feel by my work. Not much changed in my psychotherapy practice because I had always worked with many different types of people. I've always had more INFJs than any other type in my practice, but that was just kind of from me being me and, advertising the way that I authentically think and feel. With my online business of life coaching and courses and so forth, I still have a small audience, but my audience feels so targeted, if that makes sense. I find myself offering things that often just get filled right up because I'm not reaching, I know I've not fulfilled my mission. I'm not reaching every INFJ in the world. But I keep growing little by little, and I find that the same people come back again and again. And I personally delight in building, deep relationships over time. So that's perfect for me. I guess the biggest way in which it changed my business to niche down like that is that the people who find me seem to really stick. Mm-hmm. They seem to feel like they've come home, and then they stick around.
Hey, sorry to interrupt this amazing conversation, but I just had to let you know about something I've been working on behind the scenes. So at this point, I've worked one-on-one with over 50 social impact entrepreneurs and executives to help them build a thought leadership personal brand on LinkedIn that sparks change and raises revenue. So I've been going over what specifically helped my clients create a strategy that actually worked for their busy schedules and that helped them dismantle the limiting beliefs that so often keep us playing small. After all, our work is too damn big to stay a best kept secret, right? So I'm hosting my own free live private training on September 27th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You're going to learn my 3-part thought leadership framework so that you can turn your LinkedIn into a hub of opportunities. So hop on the wait list. That link is in the show notes so you can be the first one to be notified when registration opens up. There are so many gems I cannot wait to share with you. Okay, back to the conversation. Wow, they seem to feel like they've come home. That is so powerful. There's so much I want to say in response to that. I don't know if I can get it out in an organized way, but that's okay. This is my podcast. It doesn't have to be organized.
Exactly.
There's so much just good stuff in there. First of all, I really want to speak to that moment that you had before you click send on that email and those contractions, those feelings that you had. I am very familiar with those feelings. And I think that those feelings are a sign that we're moving in the right direction, that we're doing something that's going to be birthed. Like it's a contraction, right? You're about to birth something new. And of course, that's going to feel icky and scary and painful and like, oh, I don't know if this is right. But on the other side of it is just, is an audience that feels like they have come home in your content. That is so beautiful. I remember taking a class, kind of a workshop called the Op-Ed Project. It was a really beautiful experience where I got to learn how to write an op-ed. And the facilitator, Katie Orenstein, said, like part of knowing if your op-ed was kind of quote unquote, like ready to go, good enough, was if there's no opposition, if there's nobody who wouldn't like disagree with what you have to say, then why are you even putting it out there in the first place? That it's not really an op-ed. And I can think that we can draw from that experience in this case. If you're speaking to every single person in the world, like you're not really speaking to anyone. So by really whittling down who your audience is, yeah, you have created this. Again, I think we need another word for this because what comes to mind is like fan base, but it's different. It's like you've built a community. You've turned an audience into a community, like a real community. Gosh, and that's such a beautiful thing. That's such a beautiful thing. Oh, I just love that. I just love that. And I'm curious. So let me think out loud for a second because, my swim lane really is thought leadership, right? And that's what I spend all of my dreamy imagination time on. And want to very quickly define what I think of as a thought leader, because I think it's gotten a bad rap in the past, like where people think of that loud, charismatic guy with a big ego on a stage somewhere, hogging a microphone. That's not what I think of as thought leadership, right? I really think of it as a practice where it's like a way of being, right? It's a practice. It's consistently tapping into our passion, our experience, our expertise, our credibility to build trust and community as we imagine and shape the future together for the better, right? During this conversation, I am realizing that INFJs actually have really special gifts that allow us to shine as thought leaders, which again might be kind of counterintuitive at first because it's like we're quiet introverts, but not really. Like, because as you've shared, we're deeply thoughtful, we're deeply imaginative, our inner vision and our values guide us. We're empathetic for the world. We're natural change makers, right? So what would you say, Joy, to an INFJ who wants to become more visible, who wants to, turn their audience into a community, wants to change the way things are in their space, and just is struggling with not really knowing if they have what it takes to make it happen?
That's a fantastic question. Can I imagine this as someone who I'm working with in therapy or coaching?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think the first piece of my approach would be to really help them begin to gain awareness and clarity about their strengths, their gifts, the unique ways in which they operate as INFJs. I think because we are such a small part of the population, we're living in a world as INFJs that wasn't really designed for us. It was designed for, the types that are more in the majority because there are more of them and they were the ones who designed it, right? And so we often feel like we're just kind of wired wrong, or, we don't function in the same way as those around us. We struggle in areas that other people we see around us don't struggle in. A lot of things seem to come easier to other people. Things that are sort of widely or generally thought of as the easy parts of life don't necessarily come all that easy to us. Our brilliance shines in other areas. So the first piece of my approach is to really listen to that person's story, really seek to deeply understand the ins and outs of their unique experience, and begin to help them recognize the patterns of, the qualities that they have that have really magical potential. So we would look back over, moments in their lives where their gifts really shone, even though they may have not understood those to be gifts. They may have felt, as though those moments carried shame or those moments carried misunderstanding. But we're really working to shed a light on, I think of every quality, every human quality as having maybe a light side and a dark side. And the dark side is the parts of that quality that we feel alienate us from other people or are going to get us rejected. But if we look at that same quality, we can always find aspects of it that have something to contribute to this world. So that's the first step with INFJs, is really helping them to get a solid sense of self, a solid sense of their areas of brilliance. And then the second piece is to really help them so deeply understand the different components of their personality that they have some level of ability to manage the way that these components work together. The need for solitude, how we process best, the fact that our focus and attention is typically pointed to how other people feel and what they need rather than what we feel and what we need. Our analytic abilities, which can sometimes run away with us, and we get caught in these thought loops where we're endlessly planning or trying to troubleshoot instead of engaging with life, and doing things and learning that way. And so gaining a sense of, I don't want to say control, because that's not a concept that I find useful in life, though I often stumble into it. But gaining a sense of skill at being able to work with the different components of our personality and get ourselves out of the binds that INFJs often stumble into, that's going to give a person a sense of confidence and clarity about, what they have to offer, what direction they want to go in, and how they can accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. And then from there, the INFJ usually there's such a sense of possibility that's been opened up, such a sense of confidence in their own abilities that they're now able to follow their heart. They're now able to follow the nudges of their soul and really get going in the direction that's calling them.
That answer just feels like a warm hug and like a piece of apple pie. Like, that just makes me so happy. Oof, that makes me so happy. And I feel like that framework or that kind of process that you just shared with me, funny enough, is similar to the process that I do with my clients in the thought leadership space. The only difference is, in my example, like, they kind of then share those insights with the world. And I see you doing that in your content. Like, you're very prolific on Instagram, which is, where I follow you, and everything you share, like I said before, is just like, yes, I feel that. Like, I know that. So do you have a process by which you create your content? Like, how do you grab all of the gems that come into your mind and get them out into the world? I'm curious about how you create your own thought leadership brand and your own content.
I really struggled with this for years. I felt like, being a therapist, having a therapy practice, and then adding on this online business for INFJs, I often didn't want to think about creating content, with my free time. I wanted to be able to go deep inside. I wanted to, be able to process my own experiences. I didn't want to be front facing, if that makes sense. So I would go through periods where I really was really regular on Instagram, consistent, and then, months where I wouldn't post anything. because I think of INFJs as, like a lot of healers. We sort of live on the edge of the village, between the village and the wilderness. And we spend time in the village and we connect with other people. And it feels just so fulfilling and delicious. But then we need to go out into the wilderness and solitude and just restore ourselves. And so I was going through that process very literally with my social media until I think a period of about 4 months where the stars aligned. I developed this little ritual where I would wake up, I would eat breakfast, I would take my time, I would like watch my favorite gardening YouTube channel. And then I would sit in quiet reflection and come up with a tweet length, Instagram post. And some of the inspiration I got from those was moments in therapy with INFJs where I would hear myself saying something to someone and realize, hey, I think all INFJs could benefit from hearing this. A lot of the time, it was me sitting myself down and saying, what do I need to hear this morning? And so for about 3 or 4 months, almost every morning I did that. And then I went ahead and put everything I had posted on, a post scheduler so that it wouldn't have to be me giving attention to this every single day. And then now it's sort of like, well, every once in a while, I'll have a brainstorm for a new post and I'll add that to the queue. But what I get to do now that I have so much content already is allow them to recycle. And what I really get to be there for every day is, reading people's comments, responding to them, getting DMs, responding to them, the stuff that is more about connection and is more magical to me than trying to be, some kind of like a content pump, right? It was just that quiet moment with myself every morning, making the post. And now it's really more about adding to that when I feel inspired, but not feeling pressured.
Yes, yes. And not forcing yourself to do anything. I think that reusing, recycling, repurposing, that's a beautiful thing that everybody should be doing that. And I really, really relate to what you shared about the magic is in the community building. It's in the responses, it's in the DMs, it's in the conversations, it's in the brave conversations. That's where the magic happens. And I think we forget that as, I don't know if people will relate to the term content creator, but as educators, right? As people who have made a stand for something, that is where the magic happens. And I also really want to name that I just love your approach to content being a place where you can self-coach or self-journal or write to yourself, right? Share the things that you wish you had, 5 years ago, or even today, even today. That is so good because then content creation turns from a chore into a really like beautiful process, like a healing process, a self-actualization process. And we get to do that when we are working on the issue that we ourselves have the lived experience in. That's so good. Ah, that's so good.
Yeah. In fact, I loved what you said earlier in our conversation about, oh boy, I can't reproduce your exact words, but it was about really thinking of ourselves when we think about our audience.
Yes.
What we need to hear, that kind of thing. And I want to say, I spent a lot of time prior to niching down into INFJs, trying to get a handle on what they call your ideal client or your avatar, if people recognize that word. The idea that when you write or when you post to your community, you're holding in mind your ideal client and you really want to get a firm handle on who that person is, what their needs are, what their strengths are. And I always kind of struggled with putting together some kind of abstract amalgamation of an ideal client. But now my ideal client is me at different stages of my life. What did I need to hear at this stage? What did I need people to be able to reflect back to me at this stage? What kind of validation did I need when I was struggling with this? What kind of learning about myself would have just opened my world up when I was going through that? And I'm going to be honest, very often I'm talking to myself now. and I'm reminding myself of the things that I need to hear right now. And that has been, that may seem a little navel gazing to some people, but I'm the person I know best. And so, I found that when I write authentically and honestly and with vulnerability to what I need to hear, that's what other people respond to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they see themselves reflected back in what you have to share. And it just builds that connection that is so strong, right? So strong. So, gosh, I could sit around the fire with you all day, Joy, but it has come to our last question, which is one of my favorite questions to ask. As an imaginative INFJ, I can't wait to hear your answer, which is, what is your big dreamy vision for the future?
Well, I have to say that I have this dream of someday having an INFJ camp. Yeah. Let me give you the backstory. When I was a kid, I would do these day camps that my local rec center offered during the summer, and I hated them. They were just like sports and big group games. And it was so mentally and emotionally exhausting to me to be engaging in this sort of on this surface level the whole time around these activities. And I wasn't coordinated and wasn't athletic. And I didn't know that that was something you could work on and grow in. And so I just felt like, the odd person out. And I eventually started bringing books to day camp and just trying to kind of find a little bit of shade and sit and read my book quietly. And, to me, that seemed so reasonable. But the camp counselors would be like, you're really supposed to join the group. This is not really what camp is about, just sitting by yourself and reading. So I would love to have, maybe someday, separate camps for kids and teens and adults, but I would start with an adult camp. Adult INFJ camp would be in a beautiful natural setting. There would be many sort of like little seating areas and places that you could go off, by yourself to meditate or read a book or sketch or, play music, whatever you want. But then there would also be these sort of areas that really facilitate connection and mostly small groups or one-on-one. And people could move between the village and the wilderness at will, like everybody would get their own room. You could just stay in your room all day if you wanted, feeling the serenity of the place. Maybe I would give a few talks, where people can feel even more validated about doing what they want to do every moment of every day. That would be my big dreamy goal.
You are speaking directly to my heart. Like I'm literally crying right now. That sounds so wonderful. Oh my goodness. And there aren't really any spaces like that, huh? In the majority of the world. That sounds
Not
so
that I've found.
lovely. That sounds so lovely. Oh, you just made me cry a little bit. Oh my goodness.
You are touching my heart so deeply, Tanya. I'm really moved.
Let's create this camp together. I'm signing up. I want to be a camp counselor at this INFJ camp. I'm so ready.
Yay. I love it. You're in.
Oh,
we're going to do this.
That sounds, I'm so in. I love your vision. And that's the thing about vision, right? When the vision is just such a beautiful vision, it attracts people around the Campfire Circle. I know that any INFJ who's listening to that is like, sign me up. I want to be there. So yeah, you're making it. That's the first step in making it happen. Gosh, wow, incredible. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being here. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I can't thank you enough for the work that you do in the world.
Oh, I can't thank you enough, Tanya. I love your work. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation. It was really meaningful to me.
Absolutely.
What'd you think? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, reach out and let me know through lumosmarketing.co. Yes, that's Lumos, as in the illumination spell from Harry Potter. Because when you shine, magical things happen. You can get social with me on LinkedIn. And of course, check out the show notes to stay in touch with our guests. Let's talk soon.